Welcome to In the Arena of History. I'm Stephen Arms. Now, some of you are probably wondering, okay, what is this guy talking about? What arena of history? Well, I'm a former professor of history, and I did my master's thesis on Theodore Roosevelt. And in 1911, Theodore Roosevelt did a speech before the Sorbonne in France, talking about being a citizen in the Republic. But there's a part of it where he mentions the man in the arena. And Roosevelt has many noteworthy quotes, and he was a brilliant and prolific man. But I particularly like this one. And I'm not going to go into it too much because I plan on doing a video on it in the future. But if you're interested, look up Theodore Roosevelt, the man in the arena, and you'll be able to find the quote and get an idea of what's inspired my title for this web channel. Okay, now earlier this year, I was watching an old Star Trek classic episode where Captain Kirk is reciting the preamble to the Constitution to a bunch of befuddled aliens. He did a pretty good job. I mean, Shatner's from Canada, but Kirk is from Iowa, so it all balances out in the end. Okay, for the Trekkies, yes, I know it's Omega Glory and Cloud William and E. Nista and Captain Tracy and all that. Yes, I'm a Trek fan, but that's beside the point. What did occur to me when I was watching this episode is that I wondered if we the people of the United States, they may not be any less befuddled than those fake fur aliens in the episode were. So I thought I would do give a little clarification on it. The Constitution of the United States of America is a unique document in the history of the world. It's a contract between this nation and its governing body. In fact, it is what creates the governing body, along with the checks and balances to its power and authority. It's a political marvel in the history of this republic. And as some of you may have watched my video dealing with the portions of the Declaration of Independence, you know, the concept of contractual government is talked about there also. Now, this is part of the great story of this nation, and all great stories need a good beginning. So here we go. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Okay, maybe I'm not Bill Shatner, but, we do what we can. So let's kind of take this a piece at a time. We, the people of the United States. Now that's us, folks. All the citizens of this representative democracy, of the republic that we live in. Most people really only remember the we the people part. And I recently had a conversation with someone on this, actually, telling me that we the people is the ultimate part of it. And I agree that it is a government, is a contract between the people and the government, and we the people are the most important part of it. But what the person I was discussing this with didn't want to come and take into account the next line. In order to form a more perfect union. We are a union of states. We've joined together voluntarily in a contract and have formed a confederation, or a federation of states, if you want to do a Star Trek analogy. And that if we want to leave, if one of our states wants to leave, they have to get permission from the rest of the union to do so. It's, people argue about that now, and I go, well, the Civil War pretty much settled that. But again, I'm going to do a video on the causes of the Civil War in the future, so we'll put that on a back burner also. Now, the reason that a more perfect union part is that the Constitution is not our first attempt at governing. We started out with the Articles of Confederation. Now, the Articles of Confederation were adopted in March 1st of 1781, and they were approved by all 13 states. And under the Articles, the national government basically had a one-house legislature, a unicameral legislature. There was no executive or judiciary branch in the federal government. Delegates of Congress were appointed by the state legislatures, and each of them had one vote. Congress had the authority to declare war. It could develop foreign policy. It could coin money. It could regulate the Native American affairs. It could run a post office. It could borrow money. It could appoint Army and Navy officers. All powers are not specifically delegated to Congress belong to the states. And we're going to see that again in the Bill of Rights, but again, that's a video for the future also. There are several weaknesses with the Articles of the Confederation. The primary one is that Congress didn't have the power to tax or raise money, and it didn't have the power to regulate interstate or even foreign trade. States could be asked for money, but Congress really didn't have a way to get them to compel them to pay. And the states themselves could impose their own taxes, especially on imports. And I mean, when you're talking about a bunch of basically 13 little almost nation states working in conjunction, but they can have their own taxes, they can have their own commerce. I mean, it's pretty much a recipe for chaos. Now, whereas again, and one of the other issues is that Congress could not raise an army. They could requisition the states for troops, but then the states could actually, just like money, the states could give what they wanted. And if any major policy issues required the approval of at least 9 of the states, and if you were going to amend the articles, it required all 13 states to agree upon it. A unanimous vote of the states. And when you think about the fact that there was no executive branch, what later will be a president, you can kind of understand that when coming from England with the king, and the king being so powerful at the time, you can understand why they might have been afraid of giving that much power to somebody. But on the other hand, you also don't have anyone who can make quick decisions. You don't have effective leadership. Right now in the country, we're just in current history, we're getting over some disasters. We've had hurricanes of serious ones in several states, and even in Puerto Rico as a territory. And the executive office was able to act quickly on those. And a lot of people's lives were saved because of that, because they have that authority to act. And the articles, they wouldn't have had anything close to that. And it became really obvious to people who were working under the Articles of the Confederation that there was a need for a stronger national government. So in February of 1787, Congress agreed to hold a meeting to revise the Articles of the Confederation. And in 1788, and June 21st, New Hampshire was the last of the states, the 9th one that was required, to ratify the Constitution of the United States of America, making it the law of the land. Okay, having gone through the backstory, next we have in the preamble, established justice. Okay, it's somewhat of a debated set of words. I mean, justice itself means different things to different people. I mean, the philosophy of Plato has a prominent place in it on the idea and the definition of justice. So I mean, we're going back, over 2,000 years on it, and before that even. I'm not going to debate the abstract and the esoteric concept of justice. It might be an interesting video, but that again for the future. But in this case, the Constitution, I'm basically of the opinion, I think most people are, that it refers to Article 3, which is the creation of the judicial system in the United States. Now, next is ensure domestic tranquility. Okay, well, that would be to keep peace within our shores, not to allow crime and violence to engulf citizens of our nation. It's directly related to the next part, which is provide for the common defense. The government shall defend this nation and all of its citizens within it. Basically, when you're looking at this, ensure domestic tranquility is more for internal threats, and provide for the common defense would be more external threats. Now, the next part is what the devil does promote the general welfare mean. This is a contentious line in the preamble. I think people make it contentious because people like to be pains and argue over stuff unnecessarily. As in all things historical, we must examine it by the context of its time. The definition of welfare is the health and happiness and fortunes of a person or a group. I go back to the Oxford Dictionary. That's been around forever. People in this nation are allowed to pursue and acquire all of the above, each according to their own motivation and their ability. This ties back into some of the parts of the Declaration we were talking about earlier. Now, the definition of welfare is in the modern definition of it doesn't really come into existence until the 20th century. And even there it was thought of more of a welfare for charity private charities, churches, philanthropic organizations for the poor. That's when you got the context of welfare. The welfare we have now and the welfare state that it came into existence not until the 1960s under the presidency of Lyndon Johnson. And again, a debate for another time. But in this case, it's the promote the general welfare is would be the health and happiness of the people of this nation. Having promoted health, happiness, and fortunes, we must secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. This is a little more complicated. The blessings of liberty are generally considered to be natural freedoms or God-given rights. We as free-willed sentient beings have certain rights. This is a concept that comes from the period of time, the entire the Enlightenment movement that happened that leads directly into the whole the deist movement. Again has some concepts on this, and this goes hand in hand with what's happening in the United States at the time of the founding of the creation of the Constitution. The founders of this nation made the Constitution the highest law of man. It's the top law in this country. But they believed that we actually had rights that came from a higher source than ourselves. Unalienable rights. Again, back to the Declaration. This only applies to us, but it applies to the future. It applies to our posterity as a continuation of what that comes after us. To establish the Constitution as always to be the guide and the signpost of our government. Okay, all that left now is ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States of America. To ordain is to decree something, generally something determined by God or by a higher power. Establish comes from the Latin word stabilire, which is to make firm. The Constitution is a body of fundamental principles or laws according to which each state or other organizations, in this case the United States of America, is to be governed by. It's funny when we look at the preamble, again, like I mentioned in the beginning in the debate I was having with the gentleman last week, that the we the people, it always comes back to that. We need to understand that the intent as well as the core ideas of the Constitution. The Constitution was not being ratified by the states, it was being ratified by the people of the states. The Constitution, if it only applied to the states, and if it was only the states ratifying it themselves, then the state governments, and it would apply only to the states, but it wouldn't apply to the people. But the people, through their representatives, ratify the Constitution. It's again, this is that contractual concept of government we talked about to create a representative democratic republic. And one of the faults that people have when they get citizens in general, and in the concept of we the people, they say, well, one person, one vote. I mean, we should be a democracy. Well, we are. We're a representative democracy. The reason that we're not a total democracy where every person gets to vote on issues is, one, it would be impossible to have done in the time of the Constitution was written, because you'd have to literally, how are you going to get votes from everybody to an area to be counted accurately and all that? It might be easier in a modern context, but are you sure you want to do that? I mean, do Americans really want to say, let's have everybody vote and make decisions on things? If 51% of the people vote and say, we're going to have a certain religion to be the religion of the United States of America, is that okay with everybody else? If we want to say that people can do this, or they can't do that, or this is okay, or this is not okay, do we really want to have a majority of voters, which isn't necessarily a majority of people, obviously? You still would be the ones who can vote. Do you really want to have decisions made that way, where 50% plus one can decide the entirety for the nation? That Jefferson actually feared this. He referred to it as mobocracy. And when you look at it in context of the ancient world, like the city-states of Greece and the like, there's some issues with it. You really can. And even in that case, it was still through representatives. People came and voted, but it was only certain people allowed to and stuff. So it still had a form of representative government. You only really get true democracies in very small groups of people. And even that doesn't generally happen, because very quickly they'll vote somebody leader, and all of a sudden we've got an executive branch. So the preamble is the opening promise of this representative democracy, as I said. if you do not like the people that are elected in this nation, if you think that they're a bunch of corrupt clowns and that they're only interested in themselves and they're not worth a tinker's damn, then remember who elected them, okay? Because it is you. If you don't like the jackasses that are being elected, maybe they're jackasses because they're an accurate representation of those who elect them. People need to think about the fact when they go to a voter booth, a little food for thought for the future. Do you like your political parties? Are you a member of that party just because you want to be? Political parties are just a special interest group. Maybe you shouldn't be involved with it. Maybe you should be running for government yourself. Maybe you should be, trying to make the world a little better place through your votes, but also not just considering what the parties want, what the enemy is, voting for something because somebody else is your enemy and they're against it. I mean, voting is a very complicated issue, and people tend to take it very much for granted. And there are a lot of people in the world that don't have the right to vote. Matter of fact, the majority of the world doesn't have the right to make its decisions on things like that. We're unique in that. And I think we should probably count our blessings that we are. And ultimately, it's thanks to the Constitution. So anyway, if I've annoyed you or ticked you off on it, that's fine. Leave comments below. If I've given you food for thought and you like what I've said and you want to comment on it, leave comments below too. If you liked it, check the like button. If you didn't like it, I guess you can check that one too, but I'd rather check the like button. And of course, you can always subscribe to my channel if you want to see things in the future. I have more videos coming out. I'll try to get one out every week. And some of it will be on history, some of it will be on current events, some of it will be facts, and some of it will be commentary. So I thank you for watching, and we'll see you later.